What you are currently looking at is my full collection of Calvin and Hobbes books. Jealous? I've loved Calvin and Hobbes since I was a little kid. I would read these books every night and try to contain my laughter to not wake my family. As time goes on, I realize Calvin and Hobbes doesn't get a ton of media appreciation, but the more people I talk to, I realize the fan base for this beloved comic is alive and well. So I pose the question: why did we never get a Calvin and Hobbes movie? My original concept for this video was to plan out what a Calvin and Hobbes movie could potentially look like, but the more that I researched, I found something quite radical. If you're a creative person, I highly recommend reading any of Watterson's work because this is a man who so clearly loves making art for the love of the game. Calvin and Hobbes' 10th anniversary book, which can be found in the Library of Congress by the way, Watterson writes an entire section on licensing. He writes, quote, "Comic strips have been licensed from the beginning, but today the merchandising of popular cartoon characters is more profitable than ever. Derivative products, dolls, t-shirts, TV specials, and so on can turn the rice strip into a gold mine. Everyone is looking for the next Snoopy or Garfield, and Calvin and Hobbes was imagined to be the perfect candidate. The more I thought about licensing, however, the less I liked it. I spent nearly 5 years fighting my syndicate's pressure to merchandise my creation." I'm gonna go back to the Snoopy and Garfield comparison here in just a little bit, but let's keep reading. "I have several problems with licensing. First of all, I believe licensing usually cheapens the original creation. When cartoon characters appear on countless products, the public inevitably grows bored and irritated with them, and the appeal and value of the original work are diminished. Nothing dulls the edge of a new and clever cartoon like saturating the market with it. In a world of licensing and commercialization everywhere, this is completely countercultural. Bill Watterson not only knows his worth as an artist, but he respects his art enough to let it live on in its truest form. I think Watterson is hitting on something that is completely missing in the internet age when he says licensing usually cheapens the original creation. Think about how the Smurfs started as a comic. Starting in 1958, the Smurfs were created by Pierre Colleford, who was a Belgian comic writer and artist who worked under the pseudonym Peyo. Ever since their creation almost 70 years ago, the Smurfs have been licensed into an oblivion to the point where I forgot they even started as a comic strip. We're even getting a new Smurfs movie directed by Chris Miller this year, as if we didn't peak with the Neil Patrick Harris version in 2011. Something that is a much larger rabbit trail that I'm not going to cover as much here is the flesh-eating virus that is remakes and sequels. Think about the legacy of Star Wars if we take out the sequel trilogy, or the legacy of Jurassic Park if we take out the 5 other movies they tried to make after. Jury is still out on the 6th one, update to follow. This is why it's so frustrating that Disney keeps trying to retell their old stories. It's bad enough they can't make a watchable movie to save their lives, but to make matters worse, they feel the need to go back and tarnish the legacy of their actually good stories in the process. The association and existence of this terrible art makes you have to explain yourself as a fan. If I like Disney or Star Wars, I have to distinguish myself as a real fan by saying, I like this, but not this. When Bill Watterson wrote this piece on licensing in 1987, he saw what the future held for popular art and wanted nothing to do with it, even saying he fought his syndicate for years over the issue. By letting Calvin and Hobbes exist only in its purest form, Watterson is making sure that his art remains the way he intended it. I think you could see this in a very sad way of why would you gatekeep your own art that everyone loves out of fear that we'd get tired of it. But I don't think that's the intention here. Watterson loves comics. He was creating Calvin and Hobbes for the love of the medium, something we have completely lost in a modern sense. Animated movies should be live action, TikToks should be TV commercials, and if it doesn't franchise into 4 other movies, it's a flop. We just can't escape it. Watterson took great pride in his work and knew what he wanted it to be and stuck to it, even though he missed out on a reported $300 to $400 million and declined calls from Jim Henson, George Lucas, and Steven Spielberg. That last statement was from Wikipedia, so I can't really verify how true it is, but it sure makes for a dramatic YouTube video. I said earlier I would go back to the Peanuts and Garfield comparison that Watterson himself brought up, so here it goes. What I'm not saying is that Bill Watterson is way better than Charles M. Schulz or Jim Davis, and these other artists have no creative integrity at all. That's not the point I'm trying to make at all, but you can tell that Watterson was definitely being pressured to be like these other artists, and so it's interesting to compare where these works are now almost 40 years later. Peanuts has had a much larger filmography than I ever realized before making this video, and even has 2 Broadway musicals. I'm sure you've seen at least the big ones, A Charlie Brown Christmas, A Charlie Brown Thanksgiving, The Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown. These specials are very near and dear to my heart, and I truly go back to them every year. These cartoons were made in a time where the medium of animation was used for its intended purpose. We take the cartoon on the page, and we make it a cartoon on the screen. It's not that hard. Then in 2015, we got the Peanuts movie from 20th Century Fox, which was a perfect blend of the original charm of Peanuts from a modern angle that actually pushed some of the bounds of animation for the time. Now, if you've been paying attention, you'll realize that Apple has recently acquired the beloved Peanuts gang, and while this sounds like a horrible idea on paper, I think it's been wonderful. Apple TV Plus is slowly turning into one of my favorite streaming services. I have yet to see something bad on there, and they've done such an incredible job at staying true to Schultz's characters over the last few years. Meanwhile, there's Garfield, the world's most syndicated comic strip in history. Where do I start? I have never loved Garfield. I always thought he was just kind of annoying. I grew up watching the original Garfield specials and the Garfield and Friends cartoon. Over the years, we've slowly watched the Garfield IP just kind of jump around and make random movies and shows here and there, then got a Garfield movie with Chris Pratt and Samuel L. Jackson last year. This movie was at the very bottom of my yearly ranking, under Madam Web. This is one of the worst movies I've ever seen in my life. Garfield as a character and as an IP is just toast at this point. He's been reduced to Facebook memes, and there's no foreseeable hope for Garfield's redemption. If Calvin and Hobbes was given the Peanuts treatment and we got cartoons that honor the original comic style and stayed true to the characters and slightly modernized while staying timeless, I wouldn't be too mad. But this is such a rare occurrence that I fully understand Watterson's decision to stay in his lane. This is a man that loves his work, loves his characters, and loves comics as a medium, and I think we have so much to learn from him. This man could have my entire retirement fund by simply owning a Shopify account, and he chooses not to. And I'm not here to say that selling out is the death of creativity, because I also understand that making a living as an artist is near impossible. These licensing and brand deals are life-changing for artists, but we live in a landscape that values quick, high volumes of art, and it quickly turns your art into content. Bill Watterson said in his book, quote, "If I could not control what Calvin and Hobbes stood for, the strip was worthless to me." I believe that art should be consumed in the way that the artist intended, and Bill Watterson is a living example of this. But that's enough for me. I want to hear from you. Do you think we could ever have a Calvin and Hobbes movie, or should we just let sleeping dogs lie? Drop a comment down below, send this video to a friend that you think would enjoy, and subscribe for more just like this. I will see you in the next one. Bye!